Recording started.
All right, welcome everybody to the February 3rd edition of the Thursdays with Ron Study Hall type thing. Today's topic is going to be explain the situation, problems from critical reasoning. Should take us the whole period. We've got a bunch of them lined up, so should be good. All right. In any case, we need to start out as usual with the usual warnings about submissions and so on. So let's take you for that ride. Don't submit problems that are too general. I don't think that too mmany people did this past couple weeks, but please don't submit anything which is like all of geometry or all of solving problems faster. But this is the big thing that people are still doing right here. People are still submitting single problems without any sort of general connection. Please don't do that. If you submit one problem, that's why we have forums and not the study hall. The study hall is for topics that are general enough that they make a lesson that makes sense as a continuous theme. So please don't just submit a single problem and then ask about a couple of answer choices, because that's why we have forums. The forums are for incredibly specific questions like that. Also, personal issues. A couple of you are still submitting stuff like this. Here's my score. Here's my goal score. What should I do? Kind of thing. Remember, this is a study hall whose recording is watched by several hundred people. So not the kind of thing that we really want to spend time answering in front of several hundred people. We do have a place for answering such questions. That place is the forum in the so-called general folder. So we have a general folder, and if you're asking questions specifically about admissions, then we have a folder called Ask an Admissions Consultant. Good times. All right. Please submit problems that satisfy the following guidelines. Intermediate depth, meaning don't submit one problem, but don't be so broad that it's half the task. This is a good example. I need help on stats questions involving the median. One or two, actually 2 or 3 students in the last few weeks submitted this. Some of them gave a problem, but some of them just said, can you make a discussion of explain the situation type problems. That's a good level of breadth for this kind of thing. It's not so broad that it's ridiculous, like something like that. But it's also not 1 or 2 problems. It's a lesson. It's something that makes sense in that sort of level. So if you give me a specific problem, this is fine, as long as you tie it into a more general theme. So again, please don't just submit a problem as such. If you're going to submit a problem, this is fine, as long as you give me a source and as long as you ask some sort of generalized question that deals with it. And don't forget, you cannot submit problems from the official guide. Someone in the text box is asking, can you attend multiple sessions? Yes, you can. You can come as many times as you want. And the recordings are available online as well. I mean, all of the previous, you probably know, if you don't know, you should. All of the previous sessions are recorded and they're available in the same place where you signed up for this one. Don't forget, we cannot take problems from the official guide. This is one of the biggest problems that with people's submissions. Every time we have lots of people submitting problems from the official guide. You can't do that. We can't do those because of copyright reasons. So this is a free study hall. It's public, so if we gave those questions away, we would be in copyright trouble. Also, there is an extensive archive of previous sessions. We have now had about 30 sessions of the study hall, give or take a couple. So that's a lot, which means that we have covered lots of stuff already. So In the last couple weeks, for instance, we got questions about percents, we got questions about sequence notation, we got questions about combinatorics. We've done full sessions on all three of those already. So percents we did on July 22nd, sequence notation we did on July 8th, and then combinatorics we did on December 3rd. So please look through this archive. It's on the same page as everything else, Thursdays with Ron. You just have to scroll down on the page. So if you Google Thursdays with Ron, this will be the first hit that you get. In the text box, someone's talking about tense sequence. This is not where you go to submit topics. You submit topics on this page. On the Thursdays with Ron page, there's a form where you submit the topic. Also, there's a lot of submissions. I mean, we get somewhere between like 50 and 70 submissions per session. So, you know, because there's hundreds of people watching this thing. So what that means is, unfortunately, most submissions we can't cover. So I have to kind of judiciously pick and choose among what we do receive. But remember that we have forums in which you can post these kinds of things. And I mean, if a question is posted in the forum, we will generally answer it within, at most, a week. Usually these days we're answering the questions faster than that. So, but Amr, if you put the question in the forum, we'll get to it soon. I actually don't even know what an infinitive perfect is. So maybe if you could give some examples in the forum, that would be good. All right. Okay, examples, we've shown these before, examples of what not to submit. Please do not submit extremely specific problems about one question. These belong in the forum. So, and if you do that, if you submit single questions, make sure that you give the source of the problem. For a couple of these, there's no source. For example, this person just wrote, I found this question on a practice test. Not good enough, we can't use it. You need to make sure that you tell us where you got it from. Even if it's a Manhattan GMAT problem, you still have to tell us that, because there are something like 3,000 Manhattan GMAT problems, and we don't know them all by memory. So please always tell us a source, even if it is ours. No questions that are too general. I mean, you know, these questions are nice, but there's no way that we can reasonably answer them. Well, we can't answer a question like, can you explain what the OG does not? We can't answer a question like, how do I solve critical reasoning quickly? I mean, these are entire sections of the test, and this right here is basically the entire test. And then, again, personal study plans or advice, put them in the general folder. So if your question is like this, that goes in the general folder. Finally, again, no OG questions. All right. Any questions, put them in the text box. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started on the explain the situation type problems. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Before we show a particular problem of this type, I want to introduce the type of question in general. Explain the situation problems. Who knows what the general idea of these problems is? I know this is a very vague question, but in the text box, go ahead and tell me, like, what exactly is happening in problems like these? What's the general idea? Okay, an apparent discrepancy, that's true. And what does this mean? What's a paradox? What's a discrepancy? What does that mean in normal terms, in terms that are not so fancy? Yeah, it's okay, two contrary events. That's getting closer. Something sounds inconsistent. In general, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. It's, in general, you have an apparent contradiction. It's not just a comparison between events. It's you have a situation in which something might be expected to happen, but the opposite happens. Because, I mean, something needs to be explained. Something is surprising or something is unexpected. So here's an example. I'm just going to make this one up on the spot. This one's not going to have 5 answer choices or anything. But here's an example. Example, something like citizens of town A smoke fewer cigarettes per capita than do citizens of town B. However, citizens of town A suffer lung cancer at twice the rate at which citizens of town B suffer that disease. So let's talk about explain the surprising result. What is actually surprising here? Because, I mean, the key to these questions is you got to figure out exactly what it is that you're trying to explain in the first place. So the key to these questions, unlike most other critical reasoning questions, we're not really being told exactly what they want us to do. So the key here is to realize what this means. What specifically does this mean? So who can explain in the text box what is, in as precise terms as possible, what is the surprising result that we're trying to explain? Okay, someone's writing about population. Okay, well, you guys are typing a bunch of things in the box that aren't what I'm asking. I mean, first, we need to explain what. Yeah, okay, now you guys are getting it. The first thing we need to do is clarify what this is. So in these questions, what I want to do is give you a template. You guys in the text box, the most recent entries are getting a little bit closer to where we want to be here. What I want to do is give you a template that you can fill in that will help you understand exactly what it is that you're supposed to do here. Here's a template for these problems. Whenever you have one of these problems with a surprising result or a discrepancy or something that you have to explain, you should be able to fill in the following blanks. Right. Normally, in general, this is the kind of thing that has happened, or is true, or is happening. Normally, this would mean blank, but this time, blank has happened, or is true, or is happening instead. So this is what we need to explain. I mean, if you can fill in these 3 blanks, then I think you got a pretty good idea of what it is that needs to be explained. let's fill in these 3 blanks. So what is happening in this problem? Normally, what would it mean? What does it mean this time instead? See if you guys can type that in the text box. The idea is to be a little bit general about this. Yeah, so the normally box is you would have less lung cancer, but let's start out from the first box. Blank has happened. You have a difference in smoking rates. Normally, a difference in smoking rates would mean more smoking would go with more cancer. However, this time it's the opposite. This time there's more cancer in the town with less smoking. Okay, this is precisely what needs to be explained. And so there's a lot of things that you're going to be able to rule out that seem, tangentially relevant, but aren't. Because what we need, what explains more cancer as a rate, not number of cases? So the population, for example, is irrelevant because it's a rate issue. It's not a total number of cases. In a town with less smoking. So you just need something that would explain the fact that there is more cancer. That is not cigarettes, because we know from the passage that it is not cigarettes that would explain this. So we need something else that might be causing cancer. So someone who is here under an email address, Gil Kiata at Yahoo, said this pretty well. So what are some things that might be correct answers to a problem like this one? Text box. Like what could be a correct answer here? There are a billion ways that you could do this. Okay, yeah, you could have chemical factories. Possible answers. Nuclear radiation, probably not going to cause lung cancer. That's going to cause a host of other problems, but probably not lung cancer. Okay, yeah, it could be smoking something different. Could be air pollution. Could be lots of, it could be occupational hazards, like if you have lots of miners working in the town. Could be maybe they don't smoke cigarettes, smoke things other than cigarettes, etc. So things like factories and stuff, those fall under the idea of air pollution. So these are the kinds of things that would be correct answers to this problem. Genetic predisposition could work if you had if you were told that that was true in town A, for example, but not town B. Probably not as likely as the other cases we've seen mentioned here, because it's unlikely that you'd have a genetic predisposition in one town. But could be. I mean, if they gave you that information, it would work. All right, smiley face, if you guys understand the way this kind of thing works. Also, I hope you appreciate that it's a lot easier to answer this question if you have actually filled in these blanks. In other words, when I say smiley face, by the way, I'm generally talking about the button that's over there. There's a button that's next to the list of names that you see. There should be there should be another face next to it and a hand, a couple of hands. All right, so this is the primary challenge. The primary challenge, unlike other critical reasoning questions, is to interpret what the question is actually asking you. So let's make a couple more comments, and then we'll look at a few problems. So here's your template. So overall review of explain the situation. CR problems. Okay, the first point is that the primary challenge of these problems is to understand what the question actually is. And in order to understand the question, the following template that we've just seen, the following template helps in understanding the question. And that's this thing. All right, let's talk about scope. What do you guys think? Do you think that the correct answer to these questions be, will it be A, outside the scope of the passage, B, sometimes inside and sometimes outside the scope of the passage, or C, always inside the scope of the passage? If any of you don't know what the scope of the passage means, the scope of the passage is basically the boundaries of what's there. Like the topics mentioned, so. Okay, what do you guys think? Tell me in the text box. Right now we seem to have almost equal quantities of all three answers. So we got some learning to do here. Okay. Somebody is saying A whole lot of times. Everybody else is giving their opinion once. It can't be more than one of these letters, Dinesh. Either A, B, or C. Okay, let's talk about it. The short answer is it's A. All right, let's talk about why real quick. Here's our example. I mean, the whole point here is that the result is surprising. I mean, what does surprising mean? Well, if you think about it, the only reasonable meaning of surprising is that it's not explained in the passage. That's what surprising means. The result isn't explained within the passage. That's what it means that it's surprising. So, I mean, because if my passage said, for instance, citizens of town A smoke fewer cigarettes per capita than do citizens of town B. However, because citizens of town A breathe the fumes of a chemical plant, they suffer from lung cancer at twice the rate. If I gave you that kind of information in the passage, then there would be nothing to explain. I mean, the passage would already be explaining everything. So the whole point of an explain the situation problem is that it's not there. The explanation is not given to you. It's the whole point. You have to introduce outside information because it's a surprising result. As soon as you add the correct answer, it's not a surprising result anymore because now you have the explanation. So point 2 is that the correct answer will always be outside the scope of the passage in at least some way. I mean, it can include some elements that are in the scope of the passage. It does have to be relevant. But it also has to be new. It has to be a new piece of information, always, always. It cannot be something that is currently contained in the passage. So, smiley face if point 2 makes sense, because it's very important. Like there are not a lot of automatic eliminations on these problems, but in scope statements you can eliminate. Like if something is completely inside the scope of the passage, then it's wrong, because it's not going to explain any sort of surprising result. Again, look at our example here. I mean, these 3 things are completely outside the scope of the passage, but they are all correct answers. The scope of the passage is just quantity of cigarettes smoked, rates of lung cancer, and town A and town B. That's the entire scope of the passage. So in order to make this make sense, you're definitely going to have more information than that. All right, here's your two major points here. Again, there are not a lot of automatic eliminations, but if you see a choice that does stay inside the scope of the passage, then it's incorrect. I mean, it's unlikely that choices will do that. I mean, most of the time they do give you outside facts, but if they ever did repeat stuff that was in the passage, then it's not correct. Okay, let's try one. Here's the way this is going to work. I'm going to put the question in the box, what if you have two answer choices that sound like they explain it? I mean, the only way to really answer that is that one of them will and one of them won't. So if you think that you have two that do, it means that you probably haven't defined what's in these blanks exactly enough. Because they won't give you a situation with two correct answers. I mean, they can't. So if there are two such answer choices, then that's not a them problem, that's a you problem. It means that you haven't figured out exactly enough what goes in here. So, but it's a work in progress. I mean, it just means that you need to be more exact, perhaps, than you have been. All right, here's the story. When you answer these questions, if you have been to these study halls before, you are going to, this is not anything new, but you should see the following on your board. It should be up there on the top left. The top left of your window, you should see the following type of thing going on. These things here, these A, B, C, D, E, this is what you should use to answer the questions. Okay, please do not answer questions in the text box. We don't want the public to see the answers. We just want to see. I can see these results, other people can't. So use these buttons to indicate your answer. Do not, please do not indicate your answer in the text box. All right, if you're ready to start looking at some problems, give me the smiley face. All right, you guys are ready for some problems. Let's do it. Remember that the template, I'm going to put the template on the screen along with the problem just so that it'll help you. So here's the first one. Okay. There's your template. Go for it. Please answer the question using the buttons, not the text box. I'll give you a stopwatch. Go for it. Is there anybody else having problems visualizing this? I think it's just a couple of you guys. Okay, a lot of you don't have answers yet, so try to pick one in the next 15 to 30 seconds, please. Remember, your answer buttons should be over there somewhere. Okay, we're still waiting. Remember, this is the GMAT. I mean, I can't really force you guys to answer the questions here, but remember, it's the GMAT. You cannot not answer a question. Like you have to give some kind of answer. So there's still 3 or 4 of you who don't have answers. Yeah, you just click it once. If you click it again, it'll stay. But okay. Amr, Dinesh, Esha, you guys don't have answers, and Jason. Okay, here are your results. Remember, if you're not answering the question by this point, that's a big liability in terms of timing. But here are the population results here. There's 3 people who didn't answer. There's 5 shown here, but one of them is me and one of them is having tech problems. So if you're one of the 3 people who didn't answer the question, make sure that you answer the questions when you take the real test. Okay, let's talk about this. What is happening that would normally mean something else, but this time means something weird? So what goes in this blank and this blank? Let's fill those in. Text box, please. Normally, well, we're not there yet. I mean, right now, let's go with what would normally happen. Okay, you've got a government restriction, more specifically than that. What's happening is you have a price freeze. Yeah, prohibited raising of prices. So, prohibition on price increases is what has happened. Okay, now what you have to do on these problems is you have to use your sort of real world sense of things to figure out what goes in the second blank. Because the only blanks that the passage will fill in for you is the first blank and the third blank. Okay, the passage will not tell you what normally happens. You have to use a sort of sense of what happens out there in the big, bad, real world to figure that out. So, like what would normally happen if you prohibit price increases, because you have a constant use of prescription drugs, what would normally happen is that your expenditure would not increase. But this time, yeah, so exactly, a couple of you are giving me that. But this time it's the opposite. This time somebody wrote rose 15%. I don't know where you got. Oh yeah, okay, that one. Right, the percentages in these problems, not important. The exact quantitative values are not the point here. The point is just what is normal and what is not normal and why. So try not to get fixated on the percentages in these problems. That's important. This time, what happened instead is that expenditures went up. So what we need, I mean, we need an explanation for this. That is not that. It's kind of like in the last problem, we needed an explanation for lung cancer that wasn't smoking cigarettes. In this case, we need something that will explain. We need something that explains more drug costs, but isn't more use of drugs, because it says in the passage that people didn't use any more drugs. The use of prescription drugs did not expand. So, and it's also not an increase in the price of existing drugs, because that's prohibited. So, I mean, anything that will explain that. I mean, you may not be able to predict it, because there's lots of ways that you could do this. For instance, if there was more taxes on these things, that would do it too. But that's not an answer choice. But if you look at choice A, drug manufacturers concentrated on producing new medications to replace existing products. So this is something that would explain the increased cost, because these things are not, these are new drugs, so these are allowed to cost more than the existing drugs. So these are allowed to cost more. This is something that can account for this issue. Notice it's just can. It's not a have to. This is not an issue of trying to prove things. That's a different question. Right now you're just looking for something that could explain things, doesn't necessarily have to. Other answer choices that people picked, the population rose steadily. This is all per capita, so the population doesn't make any difference. Because if we're doing things per capita, then the population size is irrelevant. So this is the stats per capita. We'll get to the questions in the text box in a second. Improvements in manufacturing processes enable drug manufacturers to maintain high profit levels. Well, profits don't have anything to do with how much people are spending. It's expenditure by consumers. So profits have nothing to do with that. Consumer expenditure. This one, in addition to imposing a price freeze, the government encouraged doctors to prescribe generics. These cost less. It says instead of the more expensive versions. So this would actually have the opposite effect. I mean, this would make consumers' costs go down, not up. So this is the opposite of what we want. We want something that explains why they are spending more. This would make them spend less. And then some foreign manufacturers of expensive drugs ceased making them. This is also fewer drugs. I mean, this is less spending on expensive drugs if you can't get them anymore. So the only one that could explain these things is A. Okay, there's a question in the text box. I mean, again, the explanation in short is we need something that would allow the drug costs to increase, because people are not taking any more drugs, and the price of the drugs that are around can't go up. So no, it says they prohibited drug manufacturers from raising the prices of their products. But if you introduce a new product and it costs more, that's not raising a price. Raising a price means you raise. It means you take something that you already sell and you increase its price. So it's not a ceiling on the price of anything. It's just you can't raise the price of a product. So there you go. There's a question in the box. I have to assume that, yeah, I mean, okay. When you do these things, you will have to make some additional assumptions. This is a good point. Gaurav says, I will have to assume that the new medicines cost more than the existing products. This is true. Okay, this is an important point to note. So let me put this back on this page here. Point 3, these are not like mathematical logic proof problems. Okay, if you are expecting these to be X, if X then Y, Y kind of things, you're never going to solve any of them. Okay, you will have to make reasonable assumptions to make the connection required. So, for example, in this problem, if we say, there's air pollution, then we're allowed to assume that that air pollution can cause lung cancer. Because remember, the question is which of the following could explain. I mean, it's not rigorous logical proof. So, yeah, you're basically thinking like a real world person. Okay, do not think like a logician or a mathematician or anything like this. Do not use formal logic. Do not do Boolean. Like, do not put these problems through a NAND gate, if you know what that is. Don't do it. No formal logic. Instead, just think like a real world person, including the assumptions that such people would make on the street. In other words, don't think like you're in a classroom. I mean, classrooms are sort of infamous for making people stupid. I can elaborate on that comment later, but you got to think like you're out there on the street. So, I mean, this is something that could work if they charged more for the new drugs, and none of the other ones could explain it. So the way Pete says, the answers don't have to be definite, they're just could help. That's correct. That's a good way of summarizing it. Okay, other questions about this problem? Otherwise, we'll do another one. C. C is just about profits. I mean, C has nothing to do with how much consumers are paying. So you're trying to explain why per capita expenditure means how much people are paying for the drug. It doesn't have anything to do with profit. It has to do with the cost paid. Expenditure means how much people are paying for these things. So whether the manufacturer's profits has nothing to do with why consumers' expenditures have gone up. Okay, other questions? If not, we'll move on to another one. Okay, it doesn't look like anybody's typing. So let's try another one. Let's try this. Okay, save deal. Please use the buttons. Here's a timer. Go for it. Okay, that's your 2-minute timer, so please try to pick an answer of some kind in the next 10 seconds or so. All right, let's talk about it. I think you all have answers indicated this time. Here is your template. The template is here. And then here's your statistics. Okay, let's talk about it. There are a few people who've just shown up who don't have answers, but the rest of you indicated something, so that's good. All right, let's fill in the blanks. Remember, you should do this. I mean, at least do it in your head. If you can't fill in these 3 blanks, it means you really don't understand what it is that you're doing in the problem, which that's an issue. I mean, you want to, the primary challenge of these problems is for you to figure out exactly what it is that you're explaining before you explain it. So let's see if you guys can fill in the first 2 blanks. What would normally mean what? Sales revenue from Denoma models went up. Okay, so revenue from selling Denoma's actual models went up. But the overall sales for the whole Denoma company went down. That's the wrong blank. Normally, what this would mean is that the Denoma company's sales would go up. I mean, if your sales of your model products go up, normally this would mean the whole Denoma company's sales would also increase. However, what is happening this time is that the whole Denoma company sales decreased instead. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we have to explain. We need something that would explain. We need something that would make the overall company sales go down, even though their models sold more. Besides the company models. So, I mean, this is what we need. We just need something else that the company sells that went down, because it's not their models. We know that they sold more of their models. So, question in the text box says, why wouldn't you put the info in the first sentence? Because you have to use your logic to figure out which one is causing what. So, like, for instance, in this problem with the cigarettes, even if I switched these sentences around, it wouldn't affect what goes in which blank. Like if I say citizens of town A have lung cancer at twice the rate of town B, this is surprising because people in town A smoke less. I would still put the smoking in the first blank. And the reason why is because you have to use, your normal intuition to figure this out. But you have to use which one is the thing that would cause which one. Like, cancer rates don't cause smoking. It's smoking that causes cancer. So when you say this would normally mean this, that's the order you want to do this in. Like, this would normally result in that, but this time the result was this. So basically, it's cause up here and effects over here. So that's kind of the deal. So in this problem, you do have to figure out what is cause and what is effect. This is a result. This is the overall company sales, which results from things like sales of their models. So this is something that would cause results. Even though it's mentioned later in the passage. And this, by contrast, is a result. So that's the deal. So, yeah, because I can permute the order in which these sentences appear, and it doesn't much change the logic of what's going on. You definitely have to be awake when you read these things and figure out. Because people do the same. I mean, people invert the order of, nobody speaks arguments with perfect linear logic all the time. At least most people don't. So we need something that will explain this. We need we're talking about sales. So they need to sell something else that they did much worse in their sales of. So the company, for this to work, Denoma needs to sell something else besides their models. Besides its own model. And that's where the decrease comes from. So the only thing here that works with that is choice C. C means that this is something else that they do. They also make money from putting pieces in other companies' models. So this could actually explain this overall sales decrease, because if they sold more of their own models, but they suffered a big enough hit in the other companies' models that contain their components, then overall they could sustain a loss of revenue. As far as the other answer choices go, choice A doesn't help because the argument is only about revenue. So this is irrelevant to revenue. I mean, this kind of thing could be helpful if you were calculating things like profit. Like if you were doing profit equals revenue minus cost, then costs on things like advertising would matter. But this is revenue, this is revenue, this is revenue. Like the argument is just about revenue. So notice that the correct answer sticks with talking about revenue. For the period it issued, the major competitors reported declines that were in percentage greater than Denoma's. This doesn't really matter because we don't care about their competitors. Like, well, we're only trying to explain what happened with Denoma. So if their competitors also had declines in revenue, this doesn't help to explain why they did. D, nobody picked. Oh, these questions are from GMAT Prep. So each question we're going to see today is from the GMAT Prep practice tests. Nobody picked D, so we can skip that. During the period, electronics retailers sold remaining units at prices. But see, okay, the reason why this doesn't help is because this is included in this figure that's here. Their sales revenue from Denoma models actually went up. So that's the reason why E doesn't help, is because this is still a component of the overall sales revenue that increased. So we know that despite this statement, sales of Denoma models are not the issue. Because, I mean, this would, I mean, if this were the explanation, then this would make the sales of Denoma's models go down. And that didn't happen. If you look at what happens here. So this must not have been a big enough effect to make this red thing false. Like we need to, if you look at these three blanks, it should be clear that we need something that is not Denoma models to explain this trend. Because if you look at overall Denoma models, you've got an increase. But overall sales, you've got a decrease. Sales are the portion of the sentence. Jennifer says the portion of the sentence that says overall sales were lower than the previous year. Yeah, I mean, because that's not what the discrepancy is. I mean, again, if you think about what fits in these three blanks, like what is normal under what circumstance versus what needs to be explained, the overall sales are not so much the issue, but the issue is that this is happening with Denoma and this is happening with Denoma. And sometimes you'll have this situation where you have to filter out things that are relevant from things that are not relevant. You will definitely have that. Well, okay, E we just finished talking about. E is irrelevant because it is already covered under this larger category. I mean, E is included in this red statement. So that's within the scope of the passage. That's that's the problem with E. It's something that's already covered. This is still sales of de novo models. So this is in scope. This is not new information, so it can resolve the discrepancy. Well, okay, this is not all of the models that are being sold. I mean, this is some fraction of them that were sold at discount. But apparently not a large enough fraction to make this suffer. I mean, every retailer sells old models at a discount, so apparently that wasn't as big of a problem here. So, yeah. I mean, you can't hypothesize things that are in contradiction with the passage. I mean, if the passage says they made more money off the models, and even if they made less off of these models, you cannot take this to mean that they had less money off of the models overall. So, yeah. Okay. Andres has a pretty good explanation of it there, too. All right, let's take a look at another one. I see one more person typing, so let's see what you're typing. In the meantime, I'll look through the other problems I've got here and see what we've got. Okay. Let's try. All right, yeah, that's good. Okay. Let's try another problem. Here you go. Please use the buttons. Have fun. All right, let's pick something in the next few seconds, please. Next 10, 15 seconds, please pick something. Okay, I think that we're about done here. Looks like the class is doing a lot better on this one, so this is good news. We can probably get through it sort of quickly. Here are the results. This time, overwhelmingly, class picked the correct answer, but let's quickly review. In this case, you've got these adult dolphins who are in the feeding program at the beach. So the adult dolphins in the program live longer, yeah, so this is a good RE in the text box. The adults in the program live longer, which normally would be taken to mean that the babies, the next generation of dolphins in the program would also live longer. But for some reason, the next generation has a lower life expectancy. So, and you need to explain why that is true. So, all right, in other words, we need some reason why the babies, why the next generation doesn't live as long. And we need a reason that doesn't affect the adults. That's the big deal here, because the adults live for a longer time. So a reason that doesn't affect the adults. So something that is a difference between the child dolphins and the adult dolphins. So this one, sharks don't, this doesn't distinguish between adult, like this would affect both generations of dolphins equally. This doesn't explain anything about why their offspring would live less time. This is an equal thing, so according to this, everything should be the same. Many dolphins that feed the beach come only to the beach a few times a month. Again, no difference between generations here. I mean, you got both generations doing the same thing. And then this one, adult dolphins spend less time teaching their offspring how to catch fish than other dolphins do. So this is it, because this is not a problem for the adults. They know how to do it. But this means that the offspring are going to be worse at catching food. That's a problem that doesn't affect the adult generation. The offspring will be worse at catching food. So, all in all, that means that the younger dolphins have the lower life expectancy because they won't get as much food. All right. Pete says, weight adult dolphins versus child dolphins, or exclusive wild offspring versus feed offspring. Well, it's the things that are in the box. I mean, the discrepancy that's given in the passage is not a discrepancy between wild and beach food. The discrepancy that needs to be explained, like the only thing that makes sense in these blanks in this passage, is this difference where the adults are living for a very long time, but their kids are not. That's the discrepancy. I mean, also, they're telling you in the problem that that's what you need to explain. So, I mean, sometimes they will give you these hints, sometimes they will not. Like, sometimes they will just say, like in the last problem, they weren't this nice to you. Here's the last problem. The last problem, they just say the surprising result. So it's up to you to figure out what that result is. On the other hand, this one, they're telling you exactly what you're supposed to explain. So, Pete, you don't want to explain something else. I mean, you don't want to ignore the question. Jasmine says there's no info that says the offspring must feed in the wild. Okay, there's two responses to that, both of which are valuable. So let me tell you what those are. The first response is this. This is not a must question, okay? None of these questions are must. If you are thinking must, you will not get any of them correct. So, do not use formal logic. No must. That's not how these questions work. I mean, there are certain types of critical reasoning questions that work like that. Foremost among them, draw the conclusion, where you have to have things that must be true. But not here. I mean, none of these questions are ever must. So that's the first answer to that. You know, like in this example, air pollution doesn't, you know, it's not true that air pollution must cause lung cancer, but it would. It's reasonable and it would explain the situation. In this, no, it's not true, Andres. In some question types there is. In draw the conclusion questions, there is formal logic. It's totally dependent on the question type. Here, in this question type, there is no formal logic. But to say that's not true in GMAT land at all is a mistake. Here, again, nothing is for sure. I mean, you know, it's not true that the drug manufacturers have to charge higher prices for the new drugs. But they can. That's the point. They can, and it would work. Same situation here with this one. This doesn't have to be true, but this is something that would explain it. So first of all, when you say must, especially when you say must in all capital letters like that means you're not fully grasping how these questions work. The other answer to that is the other answer is that it does say that, I mean, you do know they get food in the wild. because it says many dolphins get as much as half their food at the beach, which means they're getting the other half or more in the wild. So actually we do know that. So be careful with both of those things. First of all, be careful with the reading of passage, because we actually do know that this time. But also, much more importantly, watch it with the must, because that's not how these questions work. There are questions that work like that, but not these. Okay. Anything else real quickly? Most of the class got this one, so we should probably be able to move on here shortly to at least one more. What about, all right, a couple of you are typing, but let's move on. Let's look at this one. There you go. Wildflower in Martin's Cafe. 2 minutes, go to town, have fun. Sorry, I forgot to clear out the answers last time. So if you've already picked an answer, please pick it again. Sorry about that. All right, let's answer this in the next 10 seconds or so. A couple of you guys, mostly people in the middle of the alphabet, who haven't picked anything yet. Okay, we've got Praneeth, Sarah, Sam, Krishna, Jason, Jasmine. Remember, it's GMAT, you got to pick something. So, pick something. Okay, lots of people apparently not wanting to answer this question, but here are the, oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, here are the answers on the board. Mostly correct, although there's a significant amount of non-response here, so please make sure you answer the question. This one didn't seem to be too much trouble for people, so we can speed through this relatively quickly in order to get to another one. What's happening here is you've got a competing restaurant. You have a new restaurant open to compete with Wildflower Inn. Under normal circumstances, if you open a competing business, then you would expect that business at the original establishment would go down, because you've got competition. However, something is increasing the business at the Wildflower Inn. So we need something that explains this. I mean, we need some explanation. We need some way in which a competing restaurant increased business at the Wildflower Inn. So, you know, they just got to help each other out in some way. So we need an answer choice that is like there's some sort of positive spin-off effect. So this one, weekdays and weekends doesn't, I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. So this doesn't help. This one, most of the customers of the new one had never dined in town, and they don't all get to eat there. I mean, they have to go somewhere, and they get turned away. More customers than it can eat. So then it can seed. So we have excess customers. You have excess customers who are new in town. Again, this is not a must type situation. I mean, it's certainly possible that all of these people will just go home. But that's not how these questions work. It's not a must type of thing. It's, could this explain the increased business at the other restaurant? Well, yeah, sure it could. Because these excess people who get turned away from the Wildflower, they go, you know, whatever, next door, a couple blocks over, and they eat at the Wildflower. Profit per meal's got nothing to do with how many people are eating there, so that doesn't work. Wildflower Inn is not open on Sundays. So that has nothing to do with more business at the Wildflower Inn. If anything, this would be less business there. And then we don't care who's working at these places because that doesn't have anything to do with it. So notice how this box helps. If you can fill in the box, the blanks, you got to crystallize exactly what it is that you're trying to explain. If you can do that, then you're going to be good. We got one more. Let's take a look. Let's do this one. Oh, yeah, you're going to be doing some elimination. I mean, you shouldn't do just elimination because you should use this. I mean, you should use this approach of, I mean, you don't literally have to fill in this box on a sheet of paper, but you should at least mentally fill in this box. But yeah, once you've done that, then it's all an elimination game. It's picking out the 4 answers, don't have anything to do with that. So, okay. Let's try this one. Last one of the day. Give it a shot. Question on the board of, can there be an accept question? I mean, yeah, you can have an accept question for anything. You know, because it's not a fundamentally, an accept question is not a fundamentally different question type. I mean, it's the same thing. Only instead of 1 answer working and 4 answers not working, you have 4 answers that do work and 1 answer that doesn't. But it's not different. I mean, it's just, for example, yeah, you totally could. Like in this problem right here, the smoking one, lung cancer one. Yeah, sure. All of these would explain the result except blah, 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 blah. And then this would explain it, so it would be a wrong answer, and this would explain it, so it's a wrong answer, and this would also be a wrong answer. Yeah, sure. You could totally have that. It's not, those problems are not fundamentally different from other problems. I mean, except questions are, you know, it's the format, but the technique's not any different. So here's your statistics. Overwhelmingly correct. So a nice note to go out on. Let's take a look at it. What goes in this box? Well, I mean, you painted these edge markings on all of its roads. Edge markings were painted on the roads. So normally this would mean that the accident rate should decrease on these roads. But there were more accidents. So accident rate along these roads is like the accidents per year. It's an annual accident rate. So there are more accidents per year. So we need something that will cause the accident rate to go up. We need some consequence of the edge markings that will lead to more accidents. So if you had something like accidents in the text box, someone wrote the markings came off. If the markings came off, that wouldn't do it, because then you would expect to just see. That doesn't give you a reason why the rate would go up. That would just give you a reason why the rate would return to normal, but not to go up past where normal would be. Like we actually have more than normal. So if the markings just came off, that wouldn't explain it. We need something that would actually create more accidents than there were to start with. But so E is it. If you have more drivers total, then that can very much lead to more accidents. So many drivers who drove who had gone out of their way to avoid no longer did so. This means that more people are using the road, especially at night. So more traffic on the road at night. This could reasonably lead to more accidents. So, yeah, well, it's the annual accident rate. That means accidents per year. That doesn't mean accidents per driver. It means per year. So, a higher number of accidents in this case does. No, it doesn't. It means what it says it means. It says, which is this: the annual accident rate. The annual rate of anything means how many of those things you have per year. So, in this case, if you have more number of accidents, then this really does go up. This is not a per capita rate. So, I mean, also, don't forget the common sense angle. You can't really measure, like, accidents per driver on a road because no one knows how many drivers are on the road. Like, you would actually have to track exactly how many cars drove on the road, and nobody tracks now. Like, the one thing that's good about these questions is they will not violate common sense in these kinds of ways. Like, they will not give you statistics that are implausible to collect, which is cool. Okay, good stuff. The other ones, we don't know. We don't care how many roads there are like this because it's the same roads before and after. So, in bad weather, well, it can be as difficult for drivers to see the road as it is at night. This would be a constant factor. This would be as much of an issue before the markings as after. And if B is true, then you would expect the markings to help even more because you need more aids in seeing the road. C doesn't matter because we're not talking about the absolute rate. We're just talking about being higher than it used to be. So relative to other roads is not part of the comparison. And then the type of accidents is not relevant to the number of accidents or the rate. Like the question doesn't depend on the type of accidents that are happening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We are done. You guys know where to submit questions. You submit them on the... okay, that's a good question. Deep says, question related to all CR types. Do you suggest to read the question first? Yeah, absolutely yes. I mean, there's no... I know that there is a book out there. I'm not supposed to mention particular names of books, but I think we all know. There is a book out there that says that you should read the passage before you read the question, and that is the worst advice in the world that anybody could ever possibly give. Like, that's just horrendous. Because, yeah, you've got to read the question first. Because, I mean, remember that every question type is different. So you're not going to know how to read the passage until you read the question. It's a very important concept. I mean, every question type is different. So every question type is different, and in particular, you don't read the passage the same way for each type. Like when you read these explain this situation type questions, what you're looking for is you're looking for this. No, the question. The question is this. There's never more than one question. Not answer choices. Question. That. The thing that's in red. Because you won't know how to read the passage until you see this. So, for example, on this problem, this is all of these today. These are all explain the situation type questions. So you know that what you're looking for is this. So this is how you read the passage. You read the passage looking for what is normal, what is not normal, what would we expect, what happened. If it's like a different kind of passage, you don't read it like that. Like if this said, which of the following assumptions, then you don't read the passage the same way. So if you read the passage first, you don't have those guidelines. You don't have those tips as to what matters and what doesn't matter. So, yeah, that book, again, I'm not supposed to name names. A lot of what is in that book is valuable. It's not a bad book overall. But I don't know what they were thinking with saying that. It's terrible. Like, you've got to read the question part first so that you know how to read the passage. That's the idea. Also, there's a sub point here, which is, no, it doesn't apply to RC. RC, you're going to browse the passage first. There's a sub point here that also needs to be understood, which is that you need to make sure that you are reading the passages differently for the different question types. Like if you read an assumption passage the same way that you read one of these, then that's a problem. So that means you don't really grasp the differences between the problem types, and that's going to have poor effects on your result. So, that's the deal. Like, you need to read the question prompt first, and the type of question in the prompt needs to affect the way that you read. If it doesn't, then it means you don't have a thorough enough knowledge of the differences between the question types. For instance, when you see a question that's like this, it means you have to look for this kind of thing. When you see any other question type, you are not looking for this kind of thing. It's very, stimulus response kind of thing. So yeah, Deep, it's a good question. Yeah, glad to get that resolved. Okay. All right. So I need to go. Sentence correction questions. That doesn't really have to do with today's lesson. So now is not really the time for that. All right. If you want, if you look at the November 18th study hall recording, then you will see some general advice on how to study sentence correction. That might help. So check that out. Okay. Next session, I don't know what's in these sessions until literally about 3 hours before the session, so because they're based on submission. I've said this in previous sessions before. If you are worried about difficulty level when you study verbal, then you have the wrong priorities. Like, the so-called difficulty level of verbal problems does not matter at all to people studying for the test. If it does matter to you, then the priorities aren't where they should be. Your priorities should just be, how do I answer each question type, technique. Anything you learn is going to transfer from questions of any imaginable difficulty to questions of any other. So it's irrelevant. Okay. All right, so the next session should be on the 17th. I I pick them from the submissions along with other topics that I have on my own agenda. So submit according to the guidelines, and that's it. All right, let's wrap it up. If you have any questions that are like direct MGMAT business or something like that, go ahead, fire away. Otherwise, I will log you out in about 20 or 30 seconds. Have a good night. Good night and good luck. I'm going to go ahead and kill the recording and take it easy.